Trapezoids are quadrilaterals that have one set of parallel sides. We're going to figure out how to find the area of a trapezoid by relating it to what we know about the areas of parallelograms. Okay. Look at this trapezoid. If you notice, it has two different bases. Your bases are the parallel sides. Okay? So this one on the top has a measurement of 3 inches, and this base on the bottom has a measurement of 6 inches. If we're going to use our formula for the area of a parallelogram, our formula is area equals base times height. Well, trapezoids have two bases. So in order for us to figure out how to use this formula, we have to think about what we can do with these two bases. Now, I told you that we can think about these trapezoids like we do parallelograms. Imagine I had two of these trapezoids, and I flip this one over, and I slide it together. I've now created myself a rectangle, or a parallelogram. I can use this formula, area equals base times height, to find the area of this rectangle. Now the difference is, when we look at our base, if you look at the base of this rectangle I've created, it's actually made up of the two bases in my trapezoid. So in order for me to do this formula, I can't just do base times height. What I need to think about is that this base is actually made up of the top base plus the bottom base. Okay? So when I have this, I'm going to think about this base really being these two bases that I'm adding together, the base plus this other base. And then I'm going to multiply it by the height. Now if you think about it, that will give me the area for this whole rectangle. Okay? But I don't want the whole rectangle. So what I need to do is divide that area by 2. Okay? Because I don't want the whole rectangle. I just want one of my trapezoids. So if I divide it by 2, that would give me the area for just this shape. So my formula for the area of a trapezoid is going to be that I'm going to take both of my bases and add them together. Okay? Remember, both of the bases will be this amount here. I'm going to add those together. Then I'm going to multiply it by my height, which would give me the area of this full rectangle. And finally, I'm going to divide it by 2. Now this works for all kinds of trapezoids, not just the ones that have right angles. So look down here. If I were to take this and flip it over, I've now created a parallelogram for myself. And I can see that the base of this parallelogram is made up of my two bases added together, base 1 plus base 2. So I can use the same formula, base 1 plus base 2, times the height, and then finally I would divide it in half to just get one of my trapezoids. Now let's practice this formula a little bit. We'll start off with this trapezoid. Now just like with parallelograms and triangles, when you have a trapezoid that has a slanted side measurement, we're not going to use it. Our two bases are the two sides that are parallel to each other. So when you look at your trapezoid, if you can find your two parallel sides, it would be right here and right here, those are going to be your two bases. You always start by writing your formula, and then we're going to do some substitutions. So the first thing I'm going to do is plug in base 1. Base 1 is either of these two bases. It doesn't matter which one I pick. I'm just going to pick 3. Base 2 is the other side that's parallel to it, which is going to be 6. Now remember, I add these two bases together, and then I multiply by my height. In this case, my height is 4 inches. And finally, the last part of my formula is to divide by 2. Now at this point, all we're going to do is follow our order of operations. We're going to do what's in our parentheses first, so 3 plus 6 is 9. And then I have 9 times 4, and I'm going to divide that by 2. Okay, 9 times 4 comes first, so 9 times 4 is going to be 36, and then I'll divide that by 2, and finally finish this off. 36 divided by 2 is 18. Now I can't forget my label. We have inches, and because this is an area, It's going to be square inches. So the area of this trapezoid is 18 square inches. Now let's look at one that isn't a right trapezoid, a trapezoid with a right angle. This one has a lot of extra measurements. So let's simplify this picture before we even get started. I know right away I'm not going to use these two measurements because of the fact that they are our slanty sides. I know my two bases are parallel to each other, so these are going to be my two bases, and my height is going to connect them. So let's start with our formula here. My area equals base 1, which is going to be 5 8/10, and I'm going to add to that base 2, which is 15 3/10. Oops, my decimal. And finally, I'm going to multiply that by the height, which is 7 4/10. And I'm going to do all this and finally divide it by 2. Now, when we use areas, when we find our areas, we are allowed to use a calculator. So let me put this here. We'll start off with what's in my parentheses. So we will do 5 8/10 plus 15 3/10. So my area is going to be 21 1/10 times the height, which is 7 4/10. Fine, don't forget to divide that by 2. All right, so 21 1/10 times 7 4/10 is going to equal 156 1400. Now we're almost done. Don't forget that would be an entire parallelogram. I just want a trapezoid. So I have to remember to go back and divide by 2. And I find my area is 78 700. And remember, that's going to be centimeters squared. So the thing about the trapezoid formula you have to remember is trapezoids have two bases. The bases are the parallel sides, and they're going to be two different measurements. In order to use this formula, you have to add those two bases together. So when you have two different bases, you don't pick one or the other. You add them together, then you multiply it by the height, and you divide it by 2 to find your final area.